Say it out loud. Filipino. You've said that word 10,000 times. On immigration forms, at school. When someone abroad asks where you're from. I'm Filipino. But nobody ever told you where that word came from. And when you find out, everything you thought you knew about your identity changes. Because that word was not created by your ancestors. It was created by the people who colonized them. And your ancestors, the people who lived on these islands for 50,000 years before Spain arrived, were never called Filipino, not once. So what were they called? Stay with me, because the answer changes everything. Before we go deeper, our goal on this video is to get 500 likes, share your thoughts in the comments and subscribe to the channel. It was 1543. A Spanish explorer named Ruy López de Villalobos was sailing through Southeast Asia. He looked at the islands below him, and he named them Las Islas Filipinas, the Philippine Islands, named after Prince Philip of Spain, who was 16 years old at the time, who had never visited these islands, who would never visit these islands in his entire life. And just like that, a civilization that had been building for 50,000 years was named after a teenage Spanish prince. But here is the part that most Filipinos never find out. When Spain used the word Filipino for the first time, it did not refer to the people already living here. It referred to Spanish settlers born in the Philippines. Spanish people, not your ancestors. Your ancestors were called something else entirely. Spain called them Indios, the same word they used for indigenous people across every colony they controlled. Mexico, Peru, Colombia, the Philippines, all Indios. Your Lolo's ancestors, the people who built Tondo and Butuan and Sulu, were never called Filipino by Spain. They were called a colonial label that placed them beneath the very settlers who invaded their land. So if your ancestors weren't called Filipino, what did the rest of the world call them? Before Spain gave everyone a single name, your ancestors didn't need one, because they already had names that were specific, proud, theirs. If your family is from Manila, your ancestors called themselves Taga Maynila, people of Maynila. Not Filipino, not Tagalog even, people of a specific place, a specific kingdom, a specific community. If your family is from Cebu, your ancestors called themselves Bisaya, a name so old that linguists still debate its origins. Some believe it connects to the ancient Srivijaya Empire of Sumatra, meaning your Bisaya identity may connect to one of the greatest maritime empires in Southeast Asian history. If your family is from Mindanao, your ancestors called themselves Maguindanao, people of the flooded plains, or Tausug, which literally means people of the current, or Maranao, people of the lake. Every name was a declaration of where they came from, what land they belonged to, what water they sailed, what kingdom they served. Your Lola from the Visayas wasn't Filipino first, she was Bisaya first. Your Lolo from Ilocos wasn't Filipino first, he was Ilocano first. And those identities, those specific, ancient, deeply rooted identities, are older than the Philippines itself. Here is something that will change how you see Filipino history forever. China knew about the Philippine Islands for over 1,000 years before Spain arrived. Not vaguely, not barely. They documented us, by name, in official imperial records. In 972 CE, Chinese records describe a prosperous kingdom they called Mai. Most historians believe Mai was located in Mindoro. The Chinese emperor's court described it as a sophisticated kingdom with multiple settlements, organized governance, and extensive trade connections with China. In 1001 CE, Chinese records describe the kingdom of Butuan, recording that its ruler Raja Keeling sent a formal diplomatic mission to the Chinese imperial court. The Chinese scholars who received that mission wrote in astonishment about Butuan's wealth. They described a kingdom so rich in gold that even slaves wore gold jewelry. By the 1300s, Chinese records describe Lusong, what we now call Luzon, as a major trading partner of the Ming dynasty. Chinese merchants didn't call the people here Filipinos. They called them by their kingdoms, by their rulers, by their reputations as traders, because that is what your ancestors were to China. Not nameless island people, not primitive tribes waiting to be discovered. Named, known, respected. Partners in one of the most sophisticated trade networks the ancient world had ever seen, and China remembered them for 1,000 years, long before Spain ever appeared on the horizon. Now here is something your Lolo probably never heard. Arab merchants knew about the Philippine Islands centuries before Spain arrived. Arab geographic texts from the 9th century describe islands in Southeast Asia that match the Philippine archipelago. They described the people there as skilled traders, tough negotiators, people who knew the value of what they had and were not easily cheated. The Laguna copper plate, dated 900 CE, the oldest written document ever found in the Philippines, was written in Old Malay. But it contains Arabic loanwords. In 900 CE, 600 years before Spain arrived, meaning that by the year 900, Arabic language and culture had already reached the Philippine Islands through centuries of trade contact. Your ancestors were already connected to the Arab world, already trading, already communicating, already building relationships across the Indian Ocean. The Arab merchants who sailed to these islands didn't call your ancestors Filipinos. They called them what they were, people of the sea, master traders, and they respected them enough to keep coming back, century after century, long before any European explorer had any idea these islands existed. For 300 years, Spain called indigenous Filipinos Indios, a label designed to keep them beneath the colonial system, a label that placed them below the colonial elite, below the people Spain considered their equals, and for a long time it worked. But in the 1800s, something began to shift. A generation of educated Filipinos started reading. Not just the books Spain gave them, the books Spain tried to hide from them. Chinese historical records, Arab geographic texts, the Laguna copper plate, the oral traditions of indigenous communities that had survived centuries of colonial suppression. And what they found changed everything. They found kingdoms that China had respected for 1,000 years. They found a civilization that Arab merchants had crossed the Indian Ocean to trade with. They found gold artifacts that proved Filipino craftsmanship matched anything Europe had ever produced. They found a history that was older, deeper, and more extraordinary than anything Spain had acknowledged. And they looked at the word Filipino, the word Spain had created for their own settlers, and they made a decision. We are taking this word, and we are making it ours. José Rizal used it. Andrés Bonifacio used it. The Katipunan used it. The word that Spain invented to describe themselves became the word that Filipinos used to declare their humanity, their sovereignty, their revolution. Your ancestors didn't just survive colonization, they reached into the colonizers' vocabulary and pulled out a word and turned it into something Spain never imagined it could become, a declaration of pride. So what does your name actually mean? When you say, I am Filipino, what are you really saying? You are saying, I am Tondeño, I am Butuanon, I am Bisaya, I am Tausug, I am Tagalog. I am Ilocano. I am Maguindanao. I am Lumad. I am the descendant of kingdoms that China documented for 1,000 years. I carry the name of people that Arab merchants crossed oceans to trade with. I carry the DNA of 50,000 years of civilization that existed long before any colonial power gave me any name at all. And I carry the revolutionary spirit of ancestors who took a word that was never meant for them and made it mean something extraordinary. So when your Lolo says, proud to be Filipino, he is not celebrating a Spanish colonial label. He is celebrating the act of reclamation, the act of an entire people looking at everything colonization tried to take from them and saying, we are still here. We have always been here. And we will decide what our name means. That is what Filipino means, not what Spain intended. What your ancestors made it. Here is something Spain never wanted you to know. For 333 years, Spain colonized the Philippines. They built churches on top of temples. They replaced Baybayin with the Roman alphabet. They called your ancestors Indios. And they told the world that the Philippines was theirs. But there were Filipinos who never accepted that. Not for a single day. In Mindanao, the Sultanate of Maguindanao looked at Spain and said no. Not quietly, with cannons, with armies, with a political system so sophisticated that Spain's military commanders wrote back to Manila in frustration, saying these people cannot be defeated. The Tausug of Sulu fought Spain for over 200 years. 200 years. While the rest of the archipelago was being renamed and rebaptized and reorganized under colonial rule, the Tausug kept their original name, their original faith, their original identity, completely intact. The Spanish called them Moros, trying to use the same label they had used for Muslims in Spain, trying to make them seem foreign on their own land. But the Tausug didn't need Spain's label. They already had a name. People of the current, and no colonial power was strong enough to change it. In the mountains of Luzon, the Cordillera peoples, the Igorot, built rice terraces so sophisticated that engineers today still cannot fully explain how they were constructed 2,000 years ago. Spain sent missionaries into those mountains. Most never came back. The Igorot kept their name, kept their traditions, kept their identity. While the lowlands were being colonized, the mountains remained free. So when you say Spain colonized the Philippines, remember this: they colonized part of it. There were Filipinos who looked at 333 years of Spanish power and were never impressed, who kept their original names when everyone else was being renamed, who kept their original faith when everyone else was being converted, who kept their original identity completely intact. So the next time someone tells you that colonization erased Filipino identity, tell them about the Tausug, tell them about the Maguindanao, tell them about the Igorot in the mountains of Luzon. Tell them that some Filipinos never needed to reclaim their identity because they never gave it up. Before 1543, your ancestors were Tondano and Butuanon and Bisaya and Tausug and Ilocano and Lumad and 100 other names, each one ancient, each one specific, each one proud. China knew those names for 1,000 years. The wider trading world knew these islands for centuries, and then Spain arrived and tried to replace all of them with one colonial label. But your ancestors did something Spain never expected. They took that label and they filled it with 50,000 years of history, with the gold of Butuan, with the navies of Tondo, with the resistance of Sulu, with the defiance of Maguindanao, with the warrior spirit of Lapu-Lapu, with the revolutionary fire of Bonifacio and Rizal. They filled it until it meant something no colonial power could ever take back. Filipino. It was never Spain's word. It was never a teenage prince's word. It is your word. It has always been your word. And now you know exactly what it means. Share this with your Lolo. Share it with your Lola. Send it to your family group chat right now, because every Filipino deserves to know the history of their own name. Subscribe, because every week we go deeper into the story they tried to erase.